buying a dropper post can be a bit of a minefield. You'll want to know how much drop you can have, whether it'll even fit in your bike or not, and whether or not to buy a lever separately. So stay tuned, and I'm going to go into depth about all the different things you'll need to consider when swapping or buying a new dropper post. If you've already got a dropper in here and you just want to go for more travel, so for example, dropping this post in as far as it will go and getting more travel for your money, then you might just be able to measure how much you've got. So I've got about 30 mil poking out here, and I've got a 180 travel here. So you could potentially go for a 210 if you were adding those together. So if you want the maximum amount of travel or drop in your dropper post, then you're going to need to work out your stack height. So this is the stack height, basically from clamp to clamp. And you need to account for the fact that dropper posts have a collar at the bottom here. And also it may not drop all the way in because there'll be a little bumper here or a clamp at the top. So a stack height on here, I've got 23 centimeters or 230 mil. And my clamp and collar is about 30 mil. So that basically means to get the maximum, I can only have a 200 mil travel drop, as it's the difference. So if you're running a static post and your post from the bottom of your saddle to your clamp in your frame is, for example, 24 centimeters, then if you minus 30 centimeters usually to account for the clamp and the collar, then you'll know how much travel you can have as a maximum. Now, if you're buying a new frame and you want to buy a dropper at the same time and you want the maximum, then the way I work it out is to work out how high I want my saddle in relation to my pedals. So my height is usually my inseam of my leg, which is 79 centimeters or 790 millimeters. So that is 790. So in order to get your maximum travel, you need to do a little bit of maths here. You need to subtract the crank arm length, so 170, and you need to subtract the seat tube length from the bottom bracket, which should be on your manufacturer's spec when you're buying it. And then you need to subtract another 30 mil to account for the clamp and the collar, and also minus the stack height on your saddle. And what you're left with is the maximum amount of travel you can have on your dropper. Bonus tip for you here, keep an eye out for dropper posts that can be shimmed down. So I've got a one-up dropper here which can be adjusted by 10 or 20 mils. So I worked out that I could have 160 mil travel in this frame, and they only did a 150 or a 180, but because I knew I could shim it down by 10 or 20 mils, then that means I bought the 180 so that I could shim it down to the perfect 160. Now, it's all very well working out your maximum drop and trying to get that, but you need to make sure that that actually fits inside your frame. So as you can see, I've got a little bit of a bend down here. So we refer to this as the insertion depth. So the insertion depth on a dropper is basically the measurement from the top where it goes up to the clamp all the way down to the bottom. And you'll need to know that because obviously something like this, which is quite long, won't go all the way into my frame. So I might not be able to run the maximum length possible anyway. So in order to work out your insertion depth, you can either get a tape measure and just measure down to where you think it's going to stop, or you need to take your dropper post or your post out and drop something down until it stops. Sometimes it will stop on a bottle cage boss, sometimes there'll be little collars that will stop it going all the way down, or you can simply loosen up this bolt here and drop your post all the way down as far as it can go, get a piece of tape just to mark at the top of the clamp, and then pull it out, and then you get to measure from the bottom of that tape all the way down, and that's your insertion depth. So if you want your post to go all the way in, then you're going to need to work out what that is and check the dropper post manufacturer specs on their insertion depth. As well as knowing how much insertion depth your frame can take, you'll need to know what size post it takes as well. There's 3 or 4 on the market, so you can pull your post out and have a look. Usually it's written on there, so this one's a 34.9, and you just want to match that basically. Or you'll have to check the new specs on your new frame to see what post it takes, and then match that when you're ordering your new dropper post. Another thing to consider with your frame and putting a dropper in there is whether there's any routing, any cable routing for that dropper. So this frame has an internal routing system here. Sometimes some frames will have some spare places to route an external cable on the outside of the frame like this. But if you don't have any routing, if it's an older frame perhaps, then you may have to accept a lever operated dropper. So that's a dropper with a lever up here, because otherwise the cable's not going to be able to come out anywhere, so you won't be able to operate it. Other than that, you could invest in a slightly pricier electronic version, which means that it will talk to the lever on your handlebars without a cable. You may notice that you can buy levers separately, or sometimes you can buy droppers that don't even come with levers. And that's because people just have different preferences on what levers they want to run. And some levers will even be compatible with the clamps on your brakes. One thing to bear in mind is which way the cable goes in if it's a cable operated dropper. Because if you're only upgrading the dropper and you want to keep your existing lever, then you want to make sure which end the little ferrule on your inner cable goes. So most modern ones will have the ferrule in the dropper end, and then it will be clamped at the lever end. Some older dropper posts like this one has the ferrule in the lever, and then it's tightened up at the dropper end. So if I was swapping this for a newer one where the ferrule goes in this end, then I'd need to buy a whole new lever, as this wouldn't work with it. Now, the benefit of buying the lever separately is that you can often get them to matchmake with your brakes. So on my bike, I've got some SRAM brakes. So when I ordered my dropper, I ordered a SRAM MMX, or a matchmaker system, so that the lever directly attached to the brakes and everything's nice and simple. You can also do this with Shimano, so it's often referred to as Shimano IS or Shimano iSpec. And there will be some aftermarket levers that will work with something like Magura or other brands like Hope, for example. So something to bear in mind, if you want a different lever to what comes with your dropper, then just make sure that the direction of the cable is the right way round, otherwise they won't be compatible. There are 3 types of droppers on the market. You can get mechanical, hydraulic, or electronic. So mechanical is basically a cable operated one. These are usually the most affordable because it's a simple system and they can be quite easy to fix because it's just an inner cable through an outer cable, basically. And then the hydraulic version, it can be a smoother action, but servicing them requires bleeding, much like hydraulic brakes. So you want to account for whether you want to be doing that on a regular basis. And then there's electronic. So this will be a cable-free system. It's very neat, very clean looking, no cables obviously, but it does mean that it will require batteries to be charged on a regular basis. And for that reason, it's probably a little bit more expensive than the other 2 options. Once you've got your new dropper, it should be pretty easy to install at home. But if you want a refresher, then check out Doddy's video on how to install a mechanical dropper, or check out Neil's video on how to install a hydraulic dropper. And those links will be down in the description below. I've also done a video showing you how to troubleshoot any problems with fast or slow droppers and how to fix a cable on the trail side. So do check those out. But for now, enjoy shopping. Thanks for watching.